Question. Bad karma versus good karma. People tend to say that when people are winning the lottery or getting a good job, house, great health, money, etc., he or she must have good karma. Sometimes you hear other spiritual advisors, gurus, and such say the same thing. If that is true, then it also must be the same when it's the other way around. No one would say openly, you are experiencing this difficult life because you have bad karma from a previous life or lives. Meanwhile, in Denmark, we have a horrific man who is on trial for the rape and kidnapping of a teenage girl and a possible murder of a young girl 8 years ago, who was kidnapped, raped, and subsequently murdered and found dead by a dog walker near a lake. It's so awful, don't get me wrong. However, do we have to accept that this was her karma, that young girl, to be raped and murdered, and say she had bad karma? That was her fault from a karmic point of view. Did this young girl do something horrible to this guy in a previous life, and then he took revenge for it in this life? Well, very important question. It's not so simple to answer, because what most of us who grew up in the West, what has happened to us is we didn't grow up with any spiritual understanding, and certainly no understanding of karma, because Christianity, way back when the Catholic Church was created, decided to eliminate reincarnation from Christianity, even though Jesus actually taught reincarnation. So anyway, in the West, we've grown up without an understanding of karma and reincarnation. So when we are first exposed to this idea, we often hear it from Eastern sources, primarily Hinduism and Buddhism. And the problem is that in the East, they have a very fatalistic view of karma. Even many of these gurus from the East, they have this very fatalistic. In other words, everything is predetermined. Some gurus will say this. No, everything is predetermined. And of course, that's not the highest understanding. I have talked about this in a number of videos. Because the reality of karma, the higher understanding of karma, is that karma is not a form of punishment. And karma is not deterministic. And I'm tempted here to refer to quantum mechanics. In traditional classical physics, up until the 1900s, early 1900s, they had a very deterministic view of the universe, where they thought the universe is a grand machine. And if you knew the initial conditions of the machine, the starting point, and if you knew the laws that guide the machine, you could predetermine everything that was going to happen. You could predict everything. The clockwork universe. And this was disproven by quantum physics, where it is not a matter of knowing enough, because the universe is not deterministic, because the outcome of situations is not determined until it actually happens. And it's the same with karma. You could say that from a greater perspective, karma is a teacher. But it's also a safety mechanism. So one way to explain it, karma, is from a purely energetic viewpoint. Everything is energy. That's what, again, science has proven. Einstein proved this. So the material world in which we live came into existence through a stream of energy from the spiritual realm that was lowered in vibration. And I've explained that there are 4 levels of the material world. The identity level is the highest vibrations, then the mental, the emotional, and then the physical. So there is a stream of energy that comes from the spiritual realm into this identity level, mental, emotional, and physical. So we are conscious, and we can do things only because we are receiving this stream of energy from our higher selves, and ultimately the ascended masters. That's why we can act, that's why we are conscious. But we are responsible for what we do with that energy. We have free will to do whatever we want with the energy. But if we take actions that are based on the golden rule, don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you, you will qualify the energy with a love-based vibration, which meaning it can rise back up. If we make choices from a state of what I call separation, where we see ourselves as separate beings, where we violate the golden rule, we qualify the energy with a fear-based vibration, and then it can't rise up. So this means that the fear-based vibration will accumulate in our energy fields, in our emotional, mental, and identity bodies. But we are responsible for requalifying that with a love-based vibration so it can rise up. That's really what karma is. And then the principle is that as we are taking an action, let's say we take a self-centered action, we harm somebody else. We are sending an energetic impulse from the physical level that then goes up. In fact, no matter what action we take, we're sending an energetic impulse, goes up through the emotional, mental, and identity level. If it's a love-based action, it will go into the spiritual, it will be multiplied, we will receive more energy. If it's not a love-based, if it's a fear-based, it starts descending again through the identity, mental, emotional, and at some point it becomes physical. And when the energy goes into the physical realm, that is when we experience what you call a return of karma, meaning that something can happen to us that's similar to what we did to others. That's what you call bad karma. On the other hand, if it was a love-based action, we will have it multiplied, and when that comes back down through the identity, mental, emotional, and physical, we experience what's called good karma, and something positive might happen to us. Getting a better job or winning the lottery. I don't really know if winning the lottery is good karma. It's just coincidence, I think. But anyway, so that's the whole principle of it. And the reason why that teaches us something is that what happens is that when we're sending this impulse up, a fear-based impulse, and it comes down, usually it comes back down several lifetimes later. And in a certain sense it can seem confusing because we don't remember what we did in a past life. But on the other hand, this means we now have several lifetimes where we could change our consciousness so we wouldn't do the same thing again. And see, here's how this works. So I've explained that we have these 4 levels of the mind. And in each of these levels, we have what I call these subconscious selves. At the identity level, we see ourselves as a separate being. We could, for example, just to take an example, right? We see ourselves as a Christian crusader, and it's okay to kill Muslims because they belong to the devil's religion. Or it could be a Muslim crusader that's willing to kill Christians. But anyway, so this is how we see ourselves at the identity level. Based on this, we reason that it's justifiable. Even God wants us to kill these other people. And at the emotion level, we don't even necessarily feel hatred. We just feel this great desire to kill these people to do good work. So we have these subconscious selves at these 3 levels that justify the actions. And it's through these subconscious selves that we decide to take a certain action, like kill a Muslim. This creates a fear-based impulse that then starts going up. And when it comes back down, the question is, have we in the meantime, in these lifetimes in the meantime, have we started questioning our sense of identity? Do we still see ourselves as Christians and it's even doing God's work to kill others? If we have, the karma that comes, the energy that comes back down is reinforced by that self that we haven't overcome. It's reinforced and now it's sent into the mental. Do we still have the cells there that justify why it's okay to do this? Then it's reinforced again and goes into the emotional. If we still have the feelings that it's okay to kill those that are different from us, it's reinforced again, and then it becomes physical, and then we might experience being killed because by having the experience that somebody else did to us what we did to others, we have another chance of seeing, do I want more of this or do I want more than this kind of experience? Now, if on the other hand, we have changed our sense of identity, If we have gotten rid of that subconscious self, we for example, realize that you can't really be a Christian and say it's okay to kill others because you are ignoring what Jesus said about turning the other cheek and doing unto others and loving your enemies and this and that. Then there's nothing in the identity level to reinforce the karma. So it doesn't get reinforced, it will still descend to the mental. But if we have overcome the mental beliefs, again it's not reinforced. And if we've overcome the emotional selves, it's not reinforced, which means that when it descends to the physical, either we won't be killed or we will have some lesser accident that isn't as bad. But it may be that nothing happens because we have learned the lesson, we have resolved the psychology that caused us to take that action. So, so this is the karmic aspect of it. But it leaves, of course, the question about the young girl who was kidnapped and raped and murdered. Was that her karma? Did she do something similar in a past life that she hasn't changed? And I'm not saying that couldn't be the case, but in many cases it isn't the case. And in order to understand this, you have to again look beyond this fatalistic view of karma, because there is always free will. And so, you understand that if you take this fatalistic view of karma, right, you realize that this becomes self-contradictory at some point. Because if everything that happens now is predetermined by what happened in the past, nothing could change. Right? Something happened in the past that determines what's going to happen in the future, meaning nothing could change. Everything was just repeated. It would just be a closed circle. Nothing new could happen on Earth. But we are seeing there's a certain progress on Earth, right? Societies are not as barbaric as they were in the past. You look in the past and you see that many societies were really barbaric. Killing, murder and mayhem, torture was just normal. So in a sense, once people had made the karma that caused them to experience this barbarism, we should never have gotten out of it. We should still be in the Dark Ages. But at least some societies on Earth have gotten out of it, have moved on. So why is that? It's because of free will. As I said, you can choose to question yourself and your actions in your psychology and overcome things. And therefore, societies and individuals can move forward. However, you also have to recognize here, you have to ask yourself, how was bad karma made in the first place? By people making choices. And nothing forced them to make those choices. So that means that even today, you have a fairly peaceful society as Denmark. As I said, I grew up in Denmark, and Denmark does not consider itself to be a Christian country. But the vast majority of the people in Denmark follow the golden rule. They don't do unto others what they don't want others to do to them. So in that respect, it is actually a very Christian country. So how can a girl in Denmark be exposed to this? Well, that is because of free will, new karma is made all the time. In a sense, you could say, if everything was predetermined by your past karma, you couldn't make new karma. It would just be an endless repetition of the karmic cycles. So, just as we can break out of a karmic spiral from the past, we can create a new karmic spiral. So you can have this person who over many lifetimes had built up this very dysfunctional psychology, who commits an act like this. And it may not be the karma of the victim, because new karma can be made. And But there are more complicated scenarios that can come into play, which is that, as I've said before, that let's take an abusive family, for example. A child is abused by a parent. But it may be that the child chose, it didn't have karmic circumstances that mandated it had to be embodied there because it had abused the parents in the past. It may not be that, but the child has a psychology that it wants to overcome. It wants to force itself to confront a certain psychology, such as not setting boundaries, for example, and that's why it chooses to embody there. It can also be to give an abusive person an opportunity to change. And then thirdly, there can be the bringing about the judgment of Christ upon certain people. So you could have situations where you have this girl who may have attained a fairly high level of consciousness of Christhood in a past lifetime, and by exposing itself to this situation where it could potentially be kidnapped, first of all, it gives the kidnapper an opportunity to stop, to not carry out these actions by encountering this innocent person. But also, it can bring about the judgment of Christ upon the kidnapper. So there are more complex scenarios, and that's why you can't just take this black and white approach, oh, it was her bad karma. She must have been a terrible person in a past life. That's what people want to reason when they have this fatalistic approach. And here's what I'm saying. When you have the fatalistic approach to karma, it's really that people don't want to take responsibility for themselves. And this is a characteristic of the ego, as I talk about in my ego discourses. So the ego doesn't want to accept responsibility. This is the primary reason why reincarnation was taken out of Christianity. You can look at this historically. In the 7th century, there was an emperor, a Roman emperor called Justinian, who had a wife called Theodora. She didn't like the idea that she could be punished in a future lifetime for what she did in this lifetime. Apparently, she didn't think she had done very well in this lifetime. So she was partly instrumental. The process had begun earlier, but it was partly instrumental of getting reincarnation eliminated and banned as heresy by the Catholic Church. This is just historical facts you can look up. Before that, they had already started the process in 553. There was a second church council in Constantinople where they also banned it as heresy, but it became even worse in the 7th century. So anyway, so this is one reason to deny karma or deny reincarnation, that you want to deny responsibility. But in the East, as I said, the fatalistic view of karma is also denying responsibility, because you are saying, oh, it's just bad karma, nothing I can do about it. But as I said, you can do something about it by looking at your psychology, transcending the psychology. And that's why we have to have a much more nuanced approach. And that's why we can't just say, oh, this little girl, it was just her bad karma. She must have been a terrible person in a past lifetime. Because there really can be other reasons for it. And likewise, you can't say that, oh, the perpetrator, he had just had this terrible psychology because terrible things were done to him in a past lifetime, so he couldn't really help it. He was just repeating the karmic cycle. It doesn't wash. It's totally disempowering. And as I've said before, I'm a spiritual person. I'm looking for what empowers me to improve my situation and my state of consciousness. And whatever disempowers me, I just disregard it as not valid, because it's just created by beings who want to disempower me, who want to limit my growth, and I don't accept that. So is there something else? Yeah, no one would say openly you are experiencing this difficult life because you have bad karma. Well, some people will. I mean, in the East, they will say that. But, you know, it really, the real question is not what's your karma. It's what can you do about the karma. And as I said, what you can ultimately do about karma is to resolve the psychology that caused you to misqualify the energy. And that's what's often missing, because what you see in a lot, even in Eastern philosophy, but also in some Western spiritual gurus, that they teach there's a shortcut to avoid the karma. And I'm not saying there aren't shortcuts, because even the Ascended Masters teach that you can invoke spiritual light from the Ascended Masters to transform the fear-based energy. There's especially an energy called the violet flame, which has been released by Saint Germain back in the 1930s through the I Am movement, that is very effective for transmuting karma. However, the Ascended Masters have never said that that's all you need to do. They have also said we need to resolve the psychology, because otherwise you just repeat the same pattern. I mean, do you see what I'm saying with these subconscious selves? You are taking a certain action because you, the conscious you, are experiencing life through the filter of these subconscious selves. And that's why you think there's only one way to react to a certain situation. And this may create some negative energy, and you, or fear-based energy, and you may use a spiritual tool to resolve that negative energy. But you still have a psychology. That means you will take other actions that way. So for every time you transmute the karma, you just create new karma. It just becomes just as endless of a spiral. And it will not change before you look at your psychology, before you look at the beam in your own eye, instead of looking at the splinter in the eyes of your brothers. This is just the law of karma. And I can guarantee you that you are not going to be able to find a shortcut. There is no shortcut. I don't care if anybody promises you there's a shortcut, they're lying to you. They're lying to you to either get your money or get your energy or get your loyalty or whatever. But they're lying to you. As Jesus said, not one jot and tittle of the law shall pass until all be fulfilled. When you have requalified the energy and overcome the psychology, then you will be free. Until then, you will not be free.